Yeah.
Right? So if
USB.
it's HDMI to that desktop HDMI here.
But is the laptop
You're
on?
live right now. You're live right now.
Hey guys, how are you? So today we are talking about, so you bought your deal and what do you do at this point, right? So for everybody that showed up at the 3-day, hopefully you had a great time. Last week I was a little bit down in terms of kind of after the 3-day, we're a little bit under the weather, and we're getting back in the swing of things. So today we're kind of talking about what do you do? What are the first steps once you've bought a property already? So we're going to kind of go through what we call a 3-pager. And let me see if I can have maybe Lori share the 3-pager on the screen so that everybody gets to see it. But I'm going to kind of walk you through. So hopefully you've already done, if you've already bought a property, hopefully you've already done a analysis before you bought it. If you're going to do a flip on the property, if it's going to be a long-term rental property, right? Or it's going to be a short-term rental property, or is it going to be a midterm, right? So you have all these 4 different options, and based on what you're going to do with it, it's going to depend on how you're going to fix up the property, if this is a property which is a value add. So if you're going to do a fix and flip, then guess what? You're going to have to do a little bit more work probably. If you're just doing a long-term rental, maybe you can get away with a little bit less work. If you're doing a short-term or a midterm, these are going to be generally properties that are going to be, you're going to have furniture in them. You're going to have the properties done really nicely so that they come out really nicely in pictures. So you have to think more about from a standpoint of, is it, it's going to be more closer to a flip. But think about it this way. If you're doing an STR or if you're doing a midterm sort of a rental, what do people value? Do people value a basement that has maybe a game room, right? So maybe you have a pool table, maybe you have a foosball table, something that basically becomes interesting for your end person. Is that an area that will support that? Right? Even in some of the suburbs around Chicagoland area, some of those things become critical. And then in a SCR or in a short-term rental or a midterm rental, sometimes people prefer more bedrooms. Even if the bedrooms don't have a closet, it's okay because they're coming there temporarily, but they want more bedrooms so you can have more beds, so you can have a higher number of people in terms of occupancy, right? These are things you're going to have to think about before you get started. So before you get started, you're going to have to think about these things if you have already bought the property. Now, let's talk a little bit about, I'm assuming that just for today's conversation, I'm going to assume that you have bought this property for a particular flip. Now, what you have to think about is that if I'm going to do a flip, are there any violations? Are there any things that that particular town, village, county, whatever, where I'm going to have to pull a permit? Generally, if you are around the Chicagoland area, now if we're doing this in Florida at one of the properties over there, they're not as big on necessarily, permits are not as strict. Now, depends. If you're going to be, say, in Clearwater, Tampa, some of those areas, they may be pretty strict, especially if you're taking out a garage, if you're doing those types of things. But if you're just doing inside rehabs, a lot of times, we're going to say you should always pull a permit, but then you use your own judgment call. But the way we always look at it is, okay, what is the main thing in the property that needs to be done? So the first thing, hopefully, if you follow the 3-pager, the 1-pager that we always talk about, that sort of a thing, then hopefully you already have a scope. If you don't have a scope, so here's what you're going to do. What you're going to do is you're going to go to the property. Number one, you're going to always start at the front of the property, and you're going to start with the kind of looking at the property, and then you're going to stand about 20-30 feet away from the property, take a picture starting with the yard, then you're going to go up to the property, then you're going to go to the top quarter of the property, meaning does the roof look like? What does the soffit look like? What does the gutters look like? What does the chimney look like? And literally with any of the modern phones today, you can take pretty good pictures. Then you're going to go to the right of the property. You're going to stand at a 45-degree angle, meaning the corner. Again, you're going to stand a little bit farther away from the property. All the things, what you're trying to do is catalog the property really well. So you're going to basically go to the four sides, and each corner you're going to stop and take a picture. And if there is anything, if you see, let's just say the eaves are rotten, if you see the soffit fascia is messed up, you're going to take a picture from a little bit farther away, and then you're going to zoom in and take a picture of that area. If you only have pictures of zoomed in areas, a lot of times what people will do is something is messed up, and they'll take a picture of that particular object. It looks, number one, way bigger than what it is. And number two, you can't look at the reference as to where the damage is. Is it just a little bit of damage on the fascia or on the gutters? So you always want to take pictures of the whole thing, and you want to take pictures that are a little bit in detail, right? And whenever you're at the house generally, right, it can be hot, it can be cold, it can be raining, it can be not, right? It's snowing, whatever the case is. A lot of times what we suggest is it's hard to stand there and to make a list of all the items that you need to fix. What we always suggest, and this is, if you're from Mastery, we'll always say this to you, that make sure you do a proper walk around, you do a proper pictures. This is where, if you're a little bit detail oriented, right, it's a little bit more helpful for people like me that are always in a little bit of rush. This is a little bit of a challenge to slow down, take a breath, to take good pictures. What you're trying to do is you're trying to catalog the house. And if you start from the right, always go from right to left, go from left to right or right to left, doesn't really matter, but just follow that same pattern every time, because you know what comes next. When you go in the backyard, you want to take a picture of the backyard, you want to take a picture of the fence, you want to take a picture of the back of the house, as well as where the air conditioning is, how are the hoses, how is the connector line that is coming in, so that you have it cataloged. You don't need 50 pictures of everything because it'll be too much to look at, but you want to be pertinent, and you want to take a little bit more pictures than you really will need. Why are we doing this? We're doing this because we want to catalog the property. Same thing when you go inside. You're going to take a picture of the whole room, then you take a picture of each of the particular things that need to be fixed. So the trim is messed up. You don't need to take a picture of every single piece of trim in the whole house. All the doors, inside doors, need to be replaced, then all of them need to be replaced, right? You don't have to worry about it. But if you have all the windows are great, just one of them is cracked, then take a picture of that room, take a picture of that particular window. So why are we doing this? The reason why we do this once, and hopefully you should have done this before you bought the house, but let's just say you didn't know and you didn't do this, right? What you're doing is this, that what you're going to do is you're going to go take pictures of all these things. You're going to come back to your home, come back to your office. Now you can put them on a computer. Now you can properly step by step go through, and you're going to make we call a scope of work list, right? This is scope of work. What does that mean? Scope meaning how much work do you think you need to do in that property to bring it up to par, right? If you take a contractor, and again, I know this is going to be a little controversial, that you do not just go take a contractor to the house and give him a list of 59 or 60 things to do. What's going to happen is if you give him that big a list of every single thing detailed, and I know what they teach you a lot of times so if you've ever gone to a rehabbing quote unquote course or that kind of stuff, the problem what happens is the amount of line items that you have and the amount of times that there can be change orders. Every time there's a change order, guess what's going to happen, right? The contractor is going to upcharge you. Right? I generally don't believe in giving a contractor. So if somebody is getting on the roof, right, and if the roof needs to be redone, then the roof needs to be redone. What is there for me to look at? There's nothing, as far as I'm concerned, to look at. They may say, well, the sheeting underneath may be rotten. Okay, well, what do you charge per sheet that is rotten? Generally, when you're doing a roof, they're going to give you 4 sheets, 5 sheets, depending on who the contractor is, right? That basically they assume may be rotten. So that's included in your roof price. But otherwise, if they have to do that, you just need to be aware of those types of things as to what are they going to charge. Generally, so whenever we're rehabbing a property, right, there's a couple trains of thought. One is basically hire a GC completely. They're going to do the project turnkey for you. Right? And if you're somebody new, if you just don't have the time, maybe that's the route to go. right? The other extreme is DIY, which I'm going to do it all by myself because I'm handy. I don't think the last one is a good idea at all, right? Even if you're handy, because it take you too long to do it, and in most cases ends up in a disaster, right? The model that we follow is kind of a hybrid model. So it's not turning over the entire project to GC, and it's not doing it ourselves. It's basically supervising the project as if you were the GC. Now, I said as if. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is this. See, some towns, some places, if it's extensive rehab, you're going to need a GC, right? Because they may have to post their license. You may need a licensed plumber, electrician, and we would always recommend, always use a licensed electrician and a licensed plumber, at least at minimum, right? Because obviously you don't want to have a problem with the plumbing system, and you don't want to have the house burned down because you just jerry-rig the electrical. So those are safety items, and you need to make sure it's done by the book. Another thing to think about is that generally, if you have a roof and somebody's going to get on top of the house, you want to make sure they're licensed, insured, and bonded, because somebody falls off the roof becomes a huge liability issue for you. So you want to make sure that they are licensed, insured, and bonded, because they're getting on top of the house. So if somebody gets hurt, that sort of thing. A lot of times, and I know by the book, right, everybody should have perfect licenses, perfect everything. I'm just telling you, unfortunately or fortunately, that's not the reality of how things work. Should your contractor be licensed? Yes. Should your contractor be bonded? Yes. Should your contractor have the current license from wherever it is? That way they'll carry some insurance. So in that way, at least you have some protection. But what you have to first do before you talk to a contractor is come up with the scope of work. What does scope of work look like, right? The scope of work basically simply looks like, what are all the things in the house that need to be done? Right? Now, you may make a very detailed scope of work depending on how detail-oriented you are, but you don't have to give the contractor every single nail that is popping out of the floor. Or you don't have to give them you take out the carpet, then take out the laminate, then take out this, right? I'm assuming that if there is shag carpeting in the house and I'm going to put laminate floors, you're going to have to take out the carpet. You're going to have to basically make sure the surface is level. You're going to have to make sure that the laminate goes down, right? I am assuming generally that this is understood, because that's a part of putting the floors on. So when the person is giving me a price, I'm assuming he's taking that into account, and I will verbally mention it. Generally, what my way of looking at it is this, that I try to control the plumber and electrician, and then the rest of the things I want to have another person do it. So when we talk about working with general contractors, right, you can have a general contractor that's going to be the adult babysitter, meaning they're not doing any work with their hands, but they're basically babysitting the job for you. And that's the job of a GC, and it's basically a nightmare. It's easier to babysit a baby because the baby at least sleeps at some point, right? But with GCs, it's really herding cattle. That's just how it works. That's the job of a GC, and he's putting out fires, making sure people get there, making sure things are done, making sure the village is happy, making sure the inspections are passed. That's the job of a GC generally, and that's what they do. And they have to be able to anticipate, okay, what comes next? What happens? Oh my God, the electrician didn't show up. I need to follow up on that. Well, the material is short supply, right? He needs to be able to stage the operation of getting that rehab done. Now, if you're a real estate investor, this is my suggestion, even if you're busy, I would suggest you go pay attention to your own house. Do not pay your GC up front, right? Like, I do not pay somebody to get started. If you're going to start, people call it, signing bonus. I mean, what the hell are you, right? Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, I'm going to give you a signing bonus for what? Right? It's security deposit. You're working on my house, right? This is just my attitude. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful to them, because you need good GCs, right? And if they don't know you, so I'll give you an example. Let's just say somebody is a well-known company. I'll use Danley Garages. It's one of the bigger well-known companies, and they build garages for people, right? Now, if Danley is going to come and build your garage, they may do 4 draws. They'll require a deposit because they get the work started. They may do a second draw. They may do a third draw and fourth draw, and they'll have it scheduled out. Now, with Danley garages, generally a big company like that, they're not going to just disappear on you, right? Because they have a reputation, you have legal recourse. Somebody just shows up in a truck, you don't know them from Adam, right? Do not hand them a check for 5, 10, 15,000 bucks. Just say, hey, listen, whenever we do these properties, we pay and we pay promptly, and I'm happy to give you, if you're doing, what's the first part of a rehab? First part of rehab is demo and cleanup of the property. Right? The day you do the demo, the day you do the rehab, that day I'm happy to write you a check. What is it that you're charging? 50% of the job is done. I would not say this to them, that when 50% of the job is done, you pay for 35 to 40%, right? It's called paying, it's basically called trailing payments, is my own term. I made this up, meaning you always want to be a little bit behind. That does not mean you're stiffing people, right? Because these people need the money end of the week for them and their families to live on. And they're not going to come back to you if you get in a habit of stiffing people. So you need them as much as they need you. But what I would do is just say, hey, man, listen, I owe you 800. I got 600 for you today, and I get you 200 next week, right? What you're doing is you're running a little bit behind because there are always odds and ends of a job that are not done, right? And generally, you're going to have benchmarks that you're going to decide with your general contractor or whoever is doing the work. If it's the electrician that's doing the work, then you're going to basically pay him about 2 times generally. Number one is when the rough electrical is done, he's going to have an inspection. When the rough electrical passes, at that time, you're going to make a payment. Now, the rest of the payment is after the final passes. It's not just when the wires are fed, it's after the final passes, because if you pay him the complete amount, right, after electrician is done, and then the main inspector comes back from the town, village, county, wherever it is, and say, oh, well, there were 2 things that were missed, right? Then guess what's happened? You've paid the electrician in full. So what you have to do is you have to learn how to be able to work with people without offending them. And this is a little bit of a learned art, and this is kind of human relations is really what you have to do. Because you can't just say, well, no, I'm not going to pay you, and I'm going to hold your check until my final passes. He's going to say, hey, listen, man, my electrical inspection passed. You got to pay me, right? And he's right about that. The problem is this. Sometimes there are small things that get left over. Now, once you develop a reputation with your electrician, with your plumber, with your contractor, this in the future won't be an issue because they know you pay, you're fair to them, they're fair to you. This works. But initially, this is generally whenever people are trying to do rehabs, when they're trying to get into real estate, they're doing a fix and flip, or they're trying to build a rental portfolio, the general 2 or 3 places where we see the biggest amount of problems. Number one is they overpay for the property. Number 2 is they overestimate what the property is going to sell for. And number 3 is that they pay their contractors up front. And guess what? The work doesn't get done. The money gets spent somewhere else. And that's that, right? And then here's what happens, and this is very typical. And I'm not sure you can really blame the contractor. So let's just kind of quantify the contractors. Most contractors that are really good, they're really busy, right? They're really busy. Good economy or bad, generally, they are working, right? Because why? Because they're really good. So we're trying to hire people that will give us a very fair price to do the work. So we're not willing to pay retail prices as real estate investors because we need to get our work done at wholesale pricing. And then we want great quality work. And then we want it done, quick. So when you think about that, what you're doing is you're basically really looking for a needle in the haystack. There are good contractors out there who will do the work for you for fair prices, right? We have a ton of them, right? But yet these are people and relationships you have to develop. And a lot of times, if you go hire a contractor with a big fancy truck, big fancy name, big huge marketing budget, well, guess what? Their price is going to be really high. I'll give you an example. I just had a roof done. I got estimates on that roof anywhere from $6,200 all the way to $13,000 on the same roof, right? The guy who was basically doing a $13,000, charging $13,000, is he wrong? No. He does a lot of insurance work. He had done 4 other insurance jobs in the neighborhood, and he's like, man, I charge them like close to 15,000. I'm giving you a discount at 13,000. Like, no, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. He's a good luck. You're not going to find anybody. I'm like, okay, great, no problem. Thank you. Right? Generally on a roof, I'm going to take 2 to 3 estimates, and I'm not just going to necessarily go with the cheapest one, but I'm going to go hopefully with somebody where I can check references. In this case, somebody came very highly recommended, hence we gave the job to Ali, right? So because we know him, we know the reputation, and we know he will take care of us. He was not necessarily the cheapest. He recommended a couple extra things to do. I went ahead and did those couple things because I relied on his recommendation. And with a lot of these things, roofing, siding, windows, kitchen and bathrooms, right? Kitchen, bathrooms, those are another places. Like if you're hiring a GC to put a kitchen in for you, the price for a kitchen, based on what it costs versus what he's going to charge you, there's going to be a huge disparity, right? To do a normal kitchen in a normal house, meaning a 10 by 10, 10 by 12 kitchen, something like that, right? The kitchen cabinets are going to be anywhere from $2,500 to $3,200. It's not going to be that expensive, right? Here, even in the office, we have a huge kitchen. We have a ton of cabinets, right? With all those damn cabinets, it cost me $3,900. And I know a lot of times people are like, well, but I can't find those prices. Guys, look around, right? Look at Home Depot, look at Menards if that's in the area, look at Studio 41 if it's in your area, right? And there are some baselines that for most flips, for most rentals are pretty good. You don't have to go into any sort of a custom thing. Absolutely 99.9, I challenge you. Unless you're in a couple $1 million price range, you're doing something very exotic, very high end, 99% people cannot tell the damn difference once the cabinets are hung at all whatsoever, period. They're nice, new, fresh cabinets, and it's, if it's good enough. In general cases, because what happens is the incremental cost is what starts creeping up on every single item as you start doing these types of things. Perfect example is if you say to somebody, hey, I need to basically hang my cabinets, can you come and hang them? Now, a carpenter for that may charge you anywhere from $1,000, $1,500, a couple $1,000, and not even blink an eye. But if you hired the same contractor for a day, right, by the day rate, and then you tell them, okay, I want to get the cabinets hung, right? You could literally, even in today's market, get a carpenter that knows what they're doing. And here, you don't need a very high level of skill generally to hang basic cabinets, right? $250, $300 a day is where you can easily get cabinets hung. I mean, I have on my first property, I'll never forget this, I paid $1,600 or $1,700. This is back in 2008. And I was damn proud because I was like, I thought I had gotten a great deal, right? Well, I didn't know any better. I went through Home Depot at the time, and I paid that, and I thought it was great. Home Depot paid that guy $200, $250, $300, and they pocketed the rest. I mean, good for them, but I didn't know any better. On the second house, for a similar kitchen, guess how much I paid? I paid $300 to get the cabinets hung. Now, that does not include putting countertops on, because that's a different trade that comes in and does that. And a lot of times, whenever you're thinking about rehabbing a property, every single thing in the house, you have to, barring say if you're doing foundation, that kind of stuff, because you're not going to know the breakdown between materials and labor. But for every single thing, what you have to think about is if somebody says, hey, it's $12,000 for a roof, you have to always think about, okay, how much do you think this is in materials? How much do I think this is in labor? Just ballpark, right? And if you have a 1,000 square foot house, you could literally take the picture of the roof. Where do you get the picture? You get it from Google Satellite. You could take it to Menards and just estimate the amount of squares that are on top of a roof and get a pretty good idea of how much would shingles cost. Shingles and rest of the materials, the nails, the underlayment, the ice and water shield. What would it cost on a house like that? $2,500, right? It's not going to cost somewhere more than that, a little bit less, a little bit more, but somewhere in that ballpark. So you're going to tell me that if that's the material, that just for labor, I'm going to pay about 10,000 bucks or 12,000 bucks? I don't think so. That doesn't make sense. It just doesn't pass the test. Now, what you have to think about is we're in a cold climate when you're thinking about investing about Chicago. In Florida, it's going to be a little bit different. So if there's a roofing company, they're going to account for, there's a part of the year they're not working, right? If the market is really crazy, then guess what? Their prices are going to go up. If there's inflation, their price is going to go up. But what you have to think about is that if I have to do 10 squares on a property, let's just make it realistic. If you do 13 squares, 14 squares on a small ranch, then what am I paying? If the materials is somewhere between 2,500 to 3,000, give or take, then this guy gives me a quote for $13,000 or $14,000. I'm going to pay $10,000 in labor? I don't think so. I mean, what does it take? 8-9 hours to do a roof from morning till evening? And most roofs, in most houses, a good crew can come in and literally knock it out in a day, maybe a day and a half. So what am I paying per hour? I mean, what are these guys making? What we have to learn how to do is we have to learn to break this down into small modules. See, when I started, I didn't really know what pricing I should pay. But whenever anybody would give me a price, if somebody would give me a price for the windows, $8,000. I'm like, okay, $8,000. Let me think. 13 windows or 12 windows in the property, right? An average ranch has anywhere from 11 to 14 windows on an average. And you're giving me a price of $8,000 or $9,000. I'm immediately going to go count the number of windows. Is some window bigger than average? Are they generally average size windows, right? I'm going to divide that, and I'm going to go check. I used to go check at Home Depot. I would check at Menards, and I'm like, okay, those windows at the time, obviously prices have changed a little bit, right? $120. So on an average, some window that's a little bigger, maybe $150, right? Unless you have something gigantic, it's not going to be that much more, even if it's custom order. Right? So I'm like, okay, what is the cost in the materials? And then how much to put each window in? These are refit windows. Old windows are coming out. You're popping a new window in. You're shimming it, making sure it's square. You're basically on the sides. You're putting in insulation and you're capping it, right? This is for a good window installer. Generally, it doesn't take that much. But what you have to think about is when we're doing rehabs, we have to pay wholesale pricing, meaning pricing for business. We can't be paying retail pricing because if you pay retail pricing, all your margins will go away. So I know whenever you're starting out initially, it can seem like overwhelming. Trust me, this is a learnable process. There is nothing, still till this day, I do not own a hammer and I certainly don't own a screwdriver, because I don't need one. If I need something done, I get people to do it for me because that's not my skill set, right? You may be pretty handy with things. I'm just not, and I don't want to be. Why? Because I can get people at reasonable prices, and this is a learned skill, right? And with rehabs, the one thing I will caution you, please, do not get yourself into square foot additions. Please do not get yourself into digging out basements. Do not get yourself into adding second stories. Leave that to people who are builders or builders wannabes, right? You make the highest amount of money in real estate when you are doing kitchen and bath type of rehabs, and you're basically making an old house into looking newer, right? That's where refurbishing type of a thing is how you have to look at it. You're not doing square foot additions. You're not doing digging out basements. All that looks glamorous, but you do not get as high a return on the amount of money that is invested. And that is really, really important to understand. So what are you going to do? First of all, you're going to find out, are there any violations that need to be fixed for the village? Number two, you're going to go to the property, you're going to take pictures, you're going to bring all the pictures home, you're going to make a scope of work. Scope of work meaning, what are the things that need to be done, right? You're not going to give the contractor a 100-point bullet list on the property. Even if you walk through the contractor with the contractor in the house, right? Then guess what? You're going to point out all the majors and let him come up with a list for you. If you give him a 92-point list, his list that he's going to give you back is going to be 152 points because he's going to add a bunch of stuff. I mean, if I say to somebody, hey man, I need that door changed, right? Now, what are you going to charge me for? Well, I'm going to take out the door. I'm going to basically put a new door, shim the new door, put the screws in, then caulk the whole thing. Then I'm going to paint the whole door. No, I want one price, right? If I'm going to do the doors in the house, I want one price. I want the price for the doors. I want a price for all the trim. That's how I want it done. Because when I start piecemealing it and breaking it down, which is how general contracting a lot of time is taught to people, what happens is for every single screw and every single nail, you're going to get charged. I assume if I say to you, hey man, I need the whole house painted. Now that I'm assuming that if there are small nails in the wall, those nails are going to be pulled out. And then those holes are going to be packed. That's an assumption that I always make with the people that I work with. And we don't generally, quote unquote, just hire a general contractor. What we hire is a person who is a general contractor who works with their hands and is a part of the crew that is getting the work done, right? Why? Because if you just have somebody who's a general contractor, then it's a person like you. You may have more knowledge than you, of course, but then they're managing the thing. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, mind you, right? There's nothing wrong with hiring a general contractor that's going to basically manage the whole project for you. Just understand, you're going to pay a 15 to 20% premium generally for them to do that. My personal opinion is you should find a handyman type of a person that's a little bit more than a handyman, can do the work, has a couple of helpers, has a GC license, right? And GC license, depending on the state you're in, it's different. In Florida, it's a lot more entailed. In Illinois, it's as simple as going to Chicago, showing insurance, showing a surety bond, and getting a GC license. And that's it. And registering with the particular village. It's no big deal here, right? They just want your money, and they pretty much give anybody a damn GC license, right? But the city wants their money. That's just how it works. So if they work with their hands, they're generally going to get it done for you at a much more economical price, rather than if they're in a supervisory position where they're supervising all these people. Each one of these things has its advantages and has its disadvantages. It just depends what you choose to do. Just remember, with all of these things, you're going to have a rough inspection for electrical. You're going to have a rough inspection plumbing. What does rough mean? Rough means when the tiles are not up yet, the plumbing has been done, the electrical, all the conduit has been put in, everything has been done. Now the village inspector or the town inspector is going to come. They're going to make sure all the conduit is there. Even if the wires are not fed through, that's perfectly fine. They're going to pass that. Now you can start closing up. Once everything is closed up, at that time, you're going to do final trim. What does final trim mean? Well, you're putting the faucets on, you're putting the knobs on, you're putting the switches in place for electrical, that sort of thing. At that point, they're going to come back and they're going to do a second inspection, which is called your final inspection. Maybe final electrical, final plumbing, so on and so forth. And at that time, they might point out a thing or two, or you may just pass. Now, some towns will have a final inspection. This is kind of like final, because those were just for electrical, just for plumbing, and this may be overall. Oh my God, you have two railings missing, right? And sometimes what will happen is basically the electrical inspector will pass something, but somebody else comes back, the village inspector comes back for the final inspection of the whole house, and they come back and they say, no, I need two of these things done. At this point, you can try to argue with them. It's always better not to argue with them. Try to figure out what do they want done. If it's anywhere within reason, get that done. And at that point, you're going to have to call your electrician or plumber or whatever back, say, oh, this was missed. I know they passed it, but we need to get this done. That's why you don't pay everybody completely 100% in full. You have a little bit of remaining. And just please understand, guys, just like you, just like I, right? These are hardworking people. So you want to make sure you're paying them properly, but you do want to make sure that there's some left over, because if the guy says, hey man, for $200, I'm not coming back, right? You're going to have somebody and it's not that contractors want to leave you high and dry. Just please understand, for an electrician to come back and fix one thing, pretty much half an hour of his day to get there is shot. By the time he does that, goes back, half his day or almost all his day is shot for an hour's worth of work. Right? He lost that entire day's earnings. And that's why a lot of these contractors don't want to come back to your job. At some point, hopefully you have passed. Now you're going to have to do a final walkthrough, making sure everything is good. Did you get the landscaping done? Everything is good to go, especially if it's a flip. How does the house look? How does it smell? Is it clean? Is it dirty? Are all the mechanicals, everything working? Right? Has anybody tested it? Has your filter been changed? Right? Those types of things. All the aesthetics of the house, and does it look kind of inviting even if it's a vacant house? At that point, you're ready to put it on the market. Hopefully you get your agent, or if you are the agent, you get some good pictures taken and get it back on the market and get it rolling. So hopefully some of those thoughts, some of those ideas made some sense. I know at the last Burr live meeting, we announced the winner, and that was Miss Amal. So hopefully she and her husband are going to enjoy a nice cruise. And next meeting that we have, the next one, we will be announcing the prize for the next contest as to if you're a member of Burr Cash Flow. So today that contest starts again. If you have any friends, you have family, you have other fellow investors or people who you think would benefit from being a part of the community, please invite them to Burr Cash Flow Investors. As I said, we will enter you in a drawing, and then 2 months from now, you will get a chance to win that particular prize. Whoever basically invites the most people, you get that many more chances of winning. Having said that, thanks a bunch, and we'll talk to you soon.